And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast. I'm Ace McKay, ready to be a part of your Easter season as we continue the conversation of how can we deepen our walk with God. We like to check in with the podcasts that are having those conversations at EWTN radio/podcast. So before we do that, it is the weekend. Let's check in with the Word on the Word for this weekend's reading Mass.
I think Peter's story is fascinating.
Spider-Man or the Apostle?
The Apostle. I mean, he went through a major transformation.
So did Peter Parker.
He was one of Jesus' closest apostles, and then he denied Jesus and ran away. And then we see a bold side of him after Pentecost.
This week, we're looking at the first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Peter is filled with the Holy Spirit, and he's testifying to the elders and leaders.
Peter is proclaiming that a crippled man was healed through the power of Jesus, and that Christ is the only way to salvation.
That was a bold statement to make in that day and time. Back then, the emperor was hailed as God, so salvation was attributed to him.
Basically, Peter is fearless, which is a stark contrast to the Peter that we saw during Jesus' crucifixion.
The elders and leaders are so amazed at his words that they don't know what to do with him.
But that isn't included in this Sunday's reading, so we challenge you to read the entire passage for yourself. It's Acts chapter 4, verses 5 to 22.
And join us next time.
Bye!
Great Easter reflections as we continue our Word on the Word each and every weekend. Always remember you can go back and see what you've missed and take it with you. Just go to EWTN.com/podcast and simply click on Word on the Word. I am Ace McKay. As Catholics Coast to Coast continues, we've got Pre-Canna for the Pope now with the title of their podcast being called To Become Family. And this week's topic talking about navigating hyper-masculinity and the importance of going to Joseph, as well as looking to what they call the fertility cheat sheet. So this is To Become Family on this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
And it's working. And we're back with another episode of To Become Family, your favorite, not controversial marriage and family podcast. But we get a very American-centric view of the world.
Yes.
Right? Like I used to love the phrase, Jesus is not an American.
Yes.
Because we get very we had an earthquake here in New England.
Yes. A small one.
Well, it's big for me.
We felt it.
I felt it.
And that's
my things moved a little bit.
Yeah,
we had an earthquake, and then it's in the same thing. It's similar, and where the eclipse is coming. Does that mean things are going to happen? And then I always have two things of that. One, Jesus is pretty straightforward in the Bible that no one knows the hour or time, not even him. Only the Father knows. And then also, the things that are happening here in our part of the United States has nothing to do with the end of the world, because there's other things happening all over the world. Why do we think we matter so much? That
yeah. Well, because then the other one was there's going to be two
cicadas
two groups of cicadas coming out of the earth at the same time.
That's in Illinois.
The locusts.
Well, it's just funny.
We're the only ones that matter.
Oh man, what's that effect called? There's an effect. Sorry, I always forget. Oh, man. Sorry. You keep entertaining while I look.
I'm not the fun one.
Neither am I. I'm looking up a dorky thing.
But that's what makes you fun. There's an effect that that the whole world is what you think it is.
No. All right. No. So have you ever looked in the cloud and seen a person?
No.
Not literally a person, a face. Like a face.
Yeah.
No, you're a boring child.
I knew what you meant. Still no.
No? So you've never thought you saw a thing that wasn't have you ever seen a door that's been it's fake cut from a piece of wood, and you can kind of see it looks like a face?
Yes.
Okay, those things.
I know what you're saying. I've never experienced that. Unless someone is look, you're even talking about the way the toast is toasted, and
yes.
Look at my
it looks at
chip.
Jesus. There's a meme right now of 3 Whoppers.
Yeah.
Have you seen this meme?
Yes. I don't see it.
Because you don't squint well. Because me and my Asian, we squint really well. Be offended. I'm part Chinese. I can squint.
That's going to be the controversial statement.
That's going to go viral.
Till great grandma.
No, it's my grandma. It's not my great grandma. It's my grandma.
Our kid's great grandma.
Yeah, our kid's great grandma. Chinese. Both parents are Chinese. I used to get made fun of as a little kid.
Okay.
But
no, I know what you're saying. I don't experience that. I don't see that.
You haven't seen the Whopper, Jesus Whopper?
Yes, I've seen
I have to find the Jesus Whopper meme.
I'm not okay. So on Jordan Peterson's personality assessment, I'm so low on creativity and.
You just don't enjoy life. Oh,
that's right.
Okay.
I just don't see it.
You don't see those things?
No.
All right. Well, it's the
I know what you mean.
The phenomenon's called pareidolia. Pareidolia. I said it like my English is my second language. Sorry.
It sounded like you said it the same way.
Pareidolia.
With more excitement.
No, the emphasis is on the other syllable.
Okay.
Syllable. I knew how to say that word. No, pareidolia. So that's when you do that. Like you common examples include perceived images of animals, faces, or objects in cloud formations, which Monica never sees. But so you could expand that to we start putting things together and be like, oh, look, it's this thing.
Right. Because we want some sort of control over things, to feel secure of at least I know the end of the world is coming.
We want a sign. Like St. Therese, right? We feel do the Venus to St. Therese.
They're roses.
I get a rose. Who cares that it's spring? This is for me. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm not a skeptic about things.
I'm walking through a botanical garden and look, roses everywhere.
It's like John Paul today.
Oh
our son he's praying about. Well, so our son was asked if he wanted to be an altar server. I'm sure we're going to have an episode about something today, guys. Our son wanted to be an altar server, eventually. And I'm sure I'm going to keep offending people. I'm sorry. Our son wanted to be an altar server, has asked about altar serving, and one of the priests at our parish has offered to train him. And he's been on the fence about it. So I actually talked to him a couple days ago, and he's like, I don't know what I should do. And I was like, well, you should discern. And he's like, oh, what does discern mean? I was like, you should ask Jesus what he wants, and you should do whatever he wants, because whatever he wants is the best thing for you. Okay, I'll do that. So then we had that conversation. We left it alone. And then today, Monica asked him if he's thought about it yet, or if he decided yet. He's like, no. So then Monica's like, so what are you thinking about? He's like, I'm waiting for Jesus to tell me in my heart what he wants me to do.
And it's like, wow, isn't that all of us all the time? I'm just waiting for Jesus to tell me in my heart.
He just needs a sign. He needs a sign. So
so we were just like, well, what is that going to be like? Like, how are you going to know?
Did you ask him that? I left it alone.
No, he asked me that.
Okay.
And I was like, well, sometimes it's like a feeling. And when you have that feeling of going towards doing something and it brings you happiness or peace, like you're calm about that decision. And I was like, but a lot of times, if it's a good thing, you can do it.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny how
he's cute. He's like, he doesn't want to do it if Jesus doesn't want him to do it.
And so did he didn't get anything from praying in front of Divine Mercy?
I didn't get to talk to him after Mass.
We were youth group. I got to talk to him. I want to talk to him about it.
Yep. So we had an image of Divine Mercy at church today and a St. Faustina relic.
He loves Divine Mercy.
He does.
Not because his name is John Paul. Actually, it's funny.
He loved that beforehand.
Mm-hmm. And before we explained to him.
Before we explained, he just loved the image of Divine Mercy. And then come to find out.
What? Can't share about that part.
What?
I don't want his birthday out there.
Oh. But it's not even it's the day that.
I'm sure people can look up at that point.
Fine.
Nope. Got to give him some privacy.
All right. Some obscure thing happened on some obscure day, and it was really a cool connection for him about Divine Mercy.
It was. So
maybe he needs one of those.
He needs a sign.
He needs a sign.
You just throw him through a garden. Jesus will give you red roses.
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Yep. He will splash you with water.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know. Maybe this connects. Is this a segue?
Let's see. Try it out. Because
we're going to talk tonight about the idea of hyper-masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going back to the red pill trad thing. And if you are over us talking about this, I'm sorry. We will move on at some point. But it is culturally relevant, and I think it is something worth having discussions about with your spouse. Kind of to check to make sure that even if it's not they're not influenced by social media, even if some thoughts and incorrect beliefs start creeping in, you'd be surprised how we can believe things that are just completely untrue and at the same time believe the certain things that are true. Like
Yeah.
our ability to have cognitive dissonance, where we have two competing thoughts and we believe them at the same time.
And we rationalize like why they're both
We like
coherent.
one of our friends on social media posted something about Easter, right? Jesus, Easter, cross, and then right after posted like a super new agey thing.
Yeah, about like crystals and meditating.
Yeah,
and it was like
these don't go together.
Yeah,
but it's just interesting. So like I think it's worth having discussions about this stuff. And I found a really good video that I think it explained things better than we have so far. Because I think I do better in one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Or like all-out debate. Nowhere in the middle. That's like my life.
Yeah.
Like either I'm writing the entire thing tomorrow.
Hopefully.
We might have a book.
I hope.
We have a book we're writing for Ave Maria Press. Yes. And Monica's done a great job.
I just keep tinkering at it.
She's writing. And I'm coming in hot tomorrow.
I'm excited.
I hope.
Because we just are. I'm
a little nervous.
As you may tell from our podcast, but like, but we're very different. So our styles are different, but we work well together. And so the together part has been missing.
There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. You said our styles are different, and there's an Eminem freestyle rap that just came to my mind.
Tell me.
Your style is generic, mine's authentic made. I roll like a renegade, unique renegade. It's from 8 Mile, but
you're so impressive.
No, it's a problem. We're having a podcast, and like you said a thing, and it just triggered a thought, and I want to say, like, you remember Andy? This is the worst podcast episode. I'm so sorry. Do you remember Andy when he starts singing he's singing like a jingle, and Pam makes him stop, and she says it for him. He's like,
"Yep," and he can't. He
feels like I'm holding in a sneeze.
Yep.
Yeah, and he just had to finish it. I feel like I have to finish it. I'm not going to do it. I can't. Okay.
What's the next line?
No.
Okay.
I may start saying it after. But back to hyper-masculinity. Because this man is educated and doesn't have the same... He
speaks so good.
No, he doesn't have the same ailments I do. Of having been exposed to Eminem at a young age. Because of that, he's able to articulate the problem with the red pill movement, and he calls it hyper-masculinity. Because I think we've tried to propose and show that there's some merit to the things of like the trad wife idea. Like people got on us a little bit about the trad wife episode. Like we had a lot of positive stuff, but also people were saying like, oh, this isn't a trad wife. Not trad wifeism. They didn't say that, but being a trad wife isn't a fad. Like I want to be home with my family. I want to do, and like, yeah, we're not debating that.
No. Right. And then like we were really trying, maybe we weren't good enough at it, but making the distinction between the aesthetic, like the trend and the, I think she might've used the word aesthetic versus like this deeply rooted desire for a traditional home.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and there's a difference, right? Like there's a difference. And we were trying to clarify that distinction of like, yes, absolutely focus on your family and prioritize your spouse and, be aware of what your children are consuming and being exposed to and things like that. And like, yeah, but focusing on the home first before focusing outside the home. But that the like hashtag tradwife trend is beyond that. It goes past that. And it has these different rubrics. It has like a set of standards for a wife to be good and holy and beautiful. And it's that's when it goes too far.
Right. And the same exists for men at this point. And I think like, I guess before I started, like, what's the point of going about this? It's not to like derail one's way of like, if they're deciding that that's the way to do it, like, it's not to derail that, but it's more to help start people coming back to a more reasonable middle of things and not try to stay on the extremes. Because a lot of the extremes are and again, this guy explains it really well of like why conservatism and the liberalism in terms of Orthodox Christianity. I'm not saying like anything outside Orthodoxy and Catholicism is correct. But even within that, there are still people who lean more towards a more liberal sense of what we would describe liberal, and there's others who would go to what we would describe as conservative. And I think this gentleman does a good job of explaining why both need each other so they can check each other. So his name is Gavin Ortlund. He's a evangelical pastor, and he's actually debated Trent Horn on things before. That's actually how I'm familiar with him. And he does a really, really good job of explaining some of the issues. And I want to listen to it, reflect on it together. And I think this is a good conversation that I think people can just, with their spouses, reflect on this as well. Because I think the more you talk about this, the more you can be aware of, like, this is how I see things, this is how, how we both see things. Because I think that you tend to be more harsher on the women's aspect of things, and I tend to be harsher on the men's, and I think you kind of are more lenient. So this will be an interesting conversation. So I'm going to share my screen, and I told you we're going to get to something, guys. I'm sorry. Sorry it took forever. Whoever I offended, if you're still here, thank you so much. See if this works. Nope, that's not how that works. There it is.
My heart burns for is that young men, a lot of my viewers are young men, that you would see something beautiful that's neither of these two alternatives. Christ is the great model. If we focus upon Christ, we can't go astray. Recently, there was a controversy on Twitter where a pastor was criticizing one of the songs at the Shepherds Conference as effeminate. He said, Bob Coughlin leading congregational singing is all the reason needed to not attend Shepherds Conference. Call it a personal preference if you like, but there's a weird effeminate vibe I get from much of the modern attempts to write corporate worship music. He got pushback, so he defended his tweet, and he posted a clip, about 2 minutes, of the song, Jesus, Thank You, and he said it has a distinctly effeminate vibe. Here's a little portion of what he posted. Now, I'm not going to link.
So I want to start there. I just want to start there. You still hear me talking in your headphones. So I think it's just to start there because I think that's a great illustration. Sorry, I left like the intro to his video in there. But he's talking about the thing on Twitter about a pastor criticizing music as effeminate that at a men's conference. I think it's important to note when we buy in, whatever side we buy into in terms of what Christian masculinity should look like, it naturally leads to what we think a Christian spirituality ought to look like, right? Like if we think like a Christian man looks like this, then there's like, okay, if that's our archetype of them, we assume like, well, this is the way they're supposed to pray. This is a relationship with God. This is how they live that out. And then like, because there's a relationship with the wife, there's a relationship with the kids. And I think this is a good illustration of that from the get-go, because that is not my type of praise and worship. I would not enjoy that at all. I would not feel connected to anything through that kind of song. But like there is praise and worship that I do feel connected to. And that does help me pray and does help me connect with our Lord. So I think very quickly when we start talking about a type of prayer as effeminate, like we're like, it's like we're cutting off an entire arm of how we can relate to Jesus. And I just think it's important to note, because like I know like one of the men today at our parish, right, talked about the men's retreat that they're going to have at the parish, and he was like, like it's so funny because I'm so opposite of what he's trying to appeal to.
Yes.
Like don't worry, the men's retreat's not going to be one where we're gonna get together and pray and read the Bible all day. I'm like, why? Why not?
That sounds great.
Why aren't we doing that? And he's just, and like, we're gonna just share stories. And from what I know, that retreat does end up being very, very emotional for a lot of those guys, which I actually don't like. Like and like, again, my preference would be something like, very, very based on scripture, very based on, I would love a beautiful liturgy, things like that. And it's just interesting. Like, I think a lot of men have different archetypes of what a good Christian man looks like. And maybe they don't talk about the red pill stuff, but like even their spirituality seeps in there somewhere. So I think it's worth that's why it's worth like ruffling things up to figure out like, where's your husband at?
Right.
or where's your, where do you think your sons are at, or whatever, of how they pray, how they interact, how they see a Christian man ought to be.
Right. Well, I think your point at the beginning of like, okay, we're not arguing orthodoxy, right? So if anything obviously goes like against church teaching, then that's a
you problem.
That's
I didn't mean to say that.
What?
Not like you, like that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. That's a you problem.
It's like I'm confused. But I do think in places like this conference, Shepherd's Conference.
I don't know.
Anywho, it seems like a big men's conference. And then on our small parish scale, New England parish level, that I think in environments like those, the whole point is to kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks, because it's like we're trying to appeal at some point to every man in the room of like, how can you speak to the Lord? How can you communicate with the Lord? How can you feel him present in your life? And so for some men, like, okay, maybe the song was not, one that I would get excited about, but there is to me something very powerful to hear only men singing a song or only men praying. Because there's been times at youth conferences where like, all right, gentlemen, like you do this.
Yeah.
And
see, I think it's just, yeah. No, you're right. There is merit to it. I tend to be such a pessimist. I'm like, this is so corny.
It is corny, but I think that there's something to the like, but do you hear the sound of all the men like saying the same thing and like speaking to the same Lord? Like, I think that like you might not be able to articulate that in that moment, but like I think that there could be something
I feel
powerful.
This is very similar to the Big Mac Whopper Jesus.
Yeah.
Of like I can squint at that all day, and I'm like, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Okay.
Right, and it's just like I'm not, because this is getting down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting, but like I get nervous about stuff like that if it's like I'm just singing it. Because I know, like, because everyone else is doing it. So, like, I know groupthink is at work for a lot of those things. Like, because everyone else is doing it, I feel like I should be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's why a lot of, like, conferences like that are frowned upon by more conservative leading circles, because they're like, what's the conversion rate really?
Yeah.
Like, is this
who's
just
actually
like,
going to go home and live this?
Right. Is this just a flash in the pan type thing? Which
Sure.
which there's a ton of merit to it. I do think part of the argument is that, like, when you get, like, surfacey songs, not that, like, that song isn't terrible. I'm not trying to go on the song, but like there's other, like there's like praise and worshiping with like Maverick City type songs, for example. Like I feel like there's a lot more that can be pulled out of you because of like the lyrics and what they're singing about and what they're calling about. So I just didn't like that song.
Okay, fair. I wasn't trying to comment on the song, just like the experience of it, like that moment in time in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
To have that, and like, to the invitation that was shared today at Mass during the announcements of, come to this thing, and like for the man that was sharing, like what was powerful was hearing the witnesses of other men, and to him, he to his credit, he shared that he had been going to Mass for a very long time, brought his children to Mass and things like that. And then he's like, so I did the things, but I didn't really know why. And then after this experience, he feels more invested in a relationship. So
I just wish there was there is an example, but like, I just wish there was like a standard of like, this is what a Christian man is, so that all men would be able to point themselves to that. Like, do I do this? I don't. Let me be better to go do that thing. Right. Because I think he kind of alluded to this, and I don't know if this is just like because of how the church has been for the last however many years, but like he thought he was living the life the way he should be, and he had a certain vision of what a spiritual man ought to be, right? And who wasn't like, oh, I didn't think of myself very religious, but my kids came here and we were involved in the parish, and I just wish that like that men can see it. Like, at least in my mind, if a man knows what their standard is, he can hold himself up to that and be like, am I living up to that or not? And I wish there was more of that. Like there's Jesus, but like, I don't know if men are pushed enough to be like, compare yourself to how he lives, or like, do you know how he lived?
Well, and I think that that's why this hyper masculinity is taking hold, right? Like we talked about that in the previous episode, is that it gives you the standards, right?
Sure,
that's
right,
even
right,
that's
right.
even why the trad wife trend is like,
Yes.
it tells you like,
Yes.
if you do these things, then you are achieving masculinity. If
Yes.
you're doing these things, then you are a good and holy wife. And so I think what is dangerous about having this, like, just check the boxes, though, is that you miss the deeper invitation to uniquely have a relationship with Jesus as you, Renzo, who is a man.
Well, thank you. So, all right, we're gonna move down a little bit to another part of the video where he's talking about the hypermasculinity is a reaction or overreaction. So kind of like you're saying, or like we both said, not having the standard masculinity being where it is right now. A lot of what we see now is an overreaction.
We live in a time in the modern West where revisionist views of masculinity specifically and just gender and sexuality more generally are being aggressively advanced. As the church, we feel that pressure. And in order to be faithful to Christ, we want to respond to that with courage and with steadfastness and oppose that pressure. It really matters how we think about things like masculinity and femininity and so forth. Right now, young men are not doing well. Young men are 3 times as likely to commit suicide than young women. They are going to college less, dropping out of the workforce more. The addictions, addiction rates are climbing, mental health struggles, and everybody's suffering in the world right now in different ways. But young men are suffering greatly. And I understand why, and I agree with Christians who want to push back against the prevailing cultural winds, many of which are causing this or contributing to this. At the same time, there is a concern of people going too far in the other direction, promoting a kind of unhealthy hypermasculinity.
Getting our relationship check up as we check in with To Become Family, formerly Pre-Cana with the Pope. If you want to find out more on what you might have missed, simply click on EWTN.com/podcast and go to our Podcast Central to catch up on that and catch future conversations. I am Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, Dare Great Things is talking about Christians in their long profession of what they do in leadership. How do we look to God's grace and lean on Christ in the midst of that? We'll go back to that conversation next on Dare Great Things with Catholics Coast to Coast.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcast today.
Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Christians have long professed that we are at the same time the same as everyone else and different. We're the same because we're human just like anyone else, but we're different because we've received the grace of Christ. Well, if this is true, then our leadership will also be the same and different. Our leadership will have to follow the same laws as everyone else and the same structure, but we should also be leading with the grace of Christ. I wanted to find out what this meant and share a short course with you, a series of talks on this subject to help you appreciate the Christian advantage. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we have this chance to understand more deeply what the call of Christ is to us in our leadership. Now remember, there's 4 kinds of leadership out there, right? You've got the leadership of a husband in his marriage. You've got the leadership of parents in their families. You've got the leadership of individuals in society. And then you have the leadership of people in the workplace. And each of these different fields of leadership have the same kind of structure to them. An individual person makes an impact in the lives or the situation around them and brings other people into that influence that they've carried, right? That's what leadership is. How I bring you to follow me. If I'm in a leadership position, then I need to have not only the skill set to do the job, but also the other type of skill set that allows me to help you to help me to do the job, to create a team, to lead other people. I mean, if we're all just on our own doing things in the world, that's wonderful and it's great. But we won't be able to be effective in what we do in the society at large without the ability to bring other people effectively into what we're doing, okay? So the skill of doing that we call leadership. And I love to focus on it because when I look at the discipleship that Jesus is asking for from his followers, I see him time and time again literally begging us to be leaders for him, to bring people underneath his influence, behind him, so to speak, so that he can lead them to heaven. I mean, he came to the earth, of course, and he left a whole law for us. He left an example for us. He showed us how to live and to live well. And then he sent his disciples to go out and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, right, and teaching them to observe all that he commanded us. In other words, Jesus is the leader, he's the king, and he's showing all humanity the way to live, right? Justice, fortitude, prudence, temperance, love for God, faith, surrender to the Father, all of those truths. And then he sends us out and he says, now make disciples, right? So I want you to bring people into that truth. So on the one hand, the influence is his, and on the other hand, the influence is supposed to be ours, right? And he says, I want you to claim the family for me. I want you to claim the culture for me. I want you to claim your workplace for me, right? So how am I supposed to do that? Well, this is where Christian leadership comes in. The leadership, the influence, and all the studies that you guys are doing to try to become the disciples that he made you, but also to become the great leaders that he wants you to be. Because we all know, right? We can have a great business, we can have a great market, we can have a great product, but if we don't have good leadership, the business will fail. It's as essential as anything else in the company is the ability that you have and your people have to bring other people to effectuate the plan, to follow through with the project, to do and work for you as you get the things done that you need for the world. And so you come to courses, you read books, you find methods, right, that will help you to develop your leadership. And these are all fine things and wonderful things. But I wonder what that would look like if we applied it also in the context of our own Christian faith. Meaning that if we took the great truths of Christ and then applied the skills of leadership to making those truths resonate in our world. If we took the presence of Jesus, that he promised he'd be with us always, how do I use leadership development to make Jesus better known in the world? It's a really great question. And it's one I think that our church really needs to confront, because one thing that happens with, for example, with the priesthood in the Catholic Church, the priest is the leader, of the parish. He's the chief evangelizer, and the priest gets all this development in understanding theology and of spirituality, but very little development in how to then make that resonate successfully through a parish, both through mechanisms and organization, and also through even personal relationships. A lot of it's left up to the personality of the priest and whether or not he had a good mom and dad, right, who taught him how to smile and laugh and et cetera, right? And a lot of priests don't have that. And what ends up happening is that the evangelization suffers. Well, you could do the same thing by looking at your own family. In the same way, your job is to bring your kids to heaven. Oh yeah, but who's going to teach you how to do that, right? How do you handle this situation? How do you handle this situation? How do you handle your own inner baggage? A lot of times people are upset about the priest this, the priest that. We priests can look around and say, what about you? How are you doing with your kids? Because some people do a great job and other people really struggle. Why? Because we all know what we are supposed to do, the what of our lives, but the how escapes us. And especially to do it well. I mean, one thing is to parent, another thing is to parent well, right? So this is where leadership development can come in, because it can help you to harness the deep gifts that God's given you and the strengths that God's given you, and then to deploy them effectively in whatever sphere of influence the Lord has placed you, so that you can influence that place well. So things like confidence, things like communication, things like optimism, things like handling your time, effectively. All these things are really important because they help give us a leadership basis for the what, right? The mission that we've been entrusted with, be it our marriages, our families. And I think that this is good, but I wonder if there's not something more. Because on the one hand, I could look at leadership with you and I could say, okay, so Christian leadership development means taking that humanity of yours and teaching you how to employ the virtues into that humanity so that then you can do what you need to do for Christ and do it well. And I think that that's a very noble subject, and it's great. It's an approach, right? It's an approach that starts from the bottom up. We look at the humanity of the human person and we say, okay, your humanity needs to be developed, so let's get you some skills. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and I love it. And I'll spend a lot of time doing just that with you. But in this course, I want to take you through something a little bit different. I want to teach you how to look at leadership from the top down. Meaning, in other words, not looking at just how I develop my humanity to be a better leader for Christ, which is very good, and at his mission. It's just that I want to take a look from a different angle at it with you, and that is to look at it from the top down. How does grace transform me to be the leader that God wants to use to make his leadership known in the world? In other words, how does God equip me to be his instrument? What's the advantage that I have as a follower of God Almighty in my leadership, right? So instead of looking at the two separately and saying, I just need to become a better human being in order to be a better leader, what if I were to say, if I'm a disciple of Christ and I follow Christ, what impact will that make in the way that I interact with the world and the way that I interact with my employees, with my spouse, with my children? Right? What difference does Jesus make in the lives and in the active leadership of his leaders? I'm really fascinated by this because I like to call it the Christian advantage, right? Because if we are going to follow Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ is God, well, there ought to be a blessing, right? That comes our way, not just in a selfish sense, but in the sense of like this should make our humanity will shine in a way that we could never develop on our own. It may be one thing to say, okay, I've learned to be a very just person. I've learned to be a very temperate person. I've learned to be very balanced in my decisions. Okay, that's great. You could be a stoic and gain all of that. You could follow stoic philosophy and gain a sense of virtues, right? But a Christian looks at virtues, looks at development of the human person in a way that's so deep and so beautiful. And I want to celebrate that with you in this course. And it's not putting anyone else down. It's just saying, like, look, if you're going to become virtuous like a Christian. Because our virtue will shine above any other naturally acquired virtue from anyone else because it comes from God and is blessed by God and is a sharing in the virtue of Christ. That's just to speak about virtue, right? But there's all kinds from the way that we manage our time, to the way that we interact with our employees, to the way that we organize our business. There ought to be a difference. When we, instead of just saying, I'm going to do these things at the service of God, if I let God guide me as I do them, well, then I will do them in a way that should be superior, radiant, advantageous, a blessing. And that's what I want to look at with you and examine that in detail so that we can celebrate our decision to lead the world by following Jesus.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
All right, so in this class in particular, I want to look at what I call the Christian leadership advantage. It's kind of a boring title, but then again, it gets to the heart of things. And it's to say that what if I let God lead me in the way that I lead others? And a lot of times people say, I'm not a leader, Father Nathan. I'm like, are you a mom? The answer is yes, I'm a mom. Well, then you're a leader. You've got 4 little ones that you're supposed to lead to heaven. I mean, are you an aunt? Yes. Well, then you're a leader. Do you own a drugstore? Yes, then you're a leader. I mean, you can't get around it that wherever the human being acts with freedom and directs themselves through life, they will impact the world around them. And if you're impacting the world for ill, well, I mean, that shame on you, right? Repent. Don't do that. Bad news bears. But if you're impacting the world in a good way, well, then you want people to follow you. You want to bring people behind you so that impact actually, is the way to follow. And that's called leadership. And from the way that we clean our homes and take care of our domestic chores to the way that we interact with our grandparents, right? If they're talking to us and we're sitting down with them, the way that we bring the best conversation out, all of us are exuding leadership all of the time. So if someone says, I'm not a leader, I get it. I mean, right, you might not have a post of leadership in society. But then again, some of you will. And that's equally important to enhance and to develop. So the reason I'm saying all this is because you have two ways of looking at that leadership. You can either look at it from the bottom up or the top down. Bottom up means, okay, I am leading other people. Okay, and so that's great. So I have to develop my leadership, and then I do that in order to accomplish Christ's will in my life. Top down is to say, I am following Christ. My union with Christ is the very first thing that I put first. And my love for Jesus is there. And then he's going to transform me from the inside by grace. And that's going to make me into a special kind of leader. Not just a human being who's leading other people, although I always am, but a human being transformed by grace who's leading other people. And this means that I become his instrument in a way that's very direct. The one who's influencing the people more than me is the Lord through me. Now, I want to right away, we dispel any kind of false mysticism or thoughts that, this is somehow, it negates the power of my actual leadership. The words that I say, the example that I bear, the decisions that I make, they're all still mine. It's just that what if the example that I bore, the decisions that I made, the words that I spoke, what if they were instruments by which God himself could heal and bless the world? I mean, not just indirectly, but directly. I mean, what if, in fact, my presence in the workforce could somehow or other bring his? I mean, it's an astounding thought. It's a thought that a lot of people aren't really ready to go to because it's where religion gets real. But this is our problem today because honestly, a lot of people discount religion and discount its value even in society because they don't allow religion to really say everything that it wants to say. There's ways to look at religion where we can say, okay, your religion means that you worship God. Well, that's true. We worship God. But Christianity goes even a step further. Not only do we worship God, but God uses us to extend his influence into the world. And you could say, okay, I can kind of understand it because you do good things. And I would say, yes, let me take it even a step further. Not just because I do good things, like I open a business and I give money to charity, and therefore I'm extending God's influence in the world. You are doing it that way. That's very true. But there's even a third level, which is to say that God bears his influence through us directly, meaning our love, our decisions, our presence, our action as a leader actually bears God's influence in a spiritual way from our souls to the souls of the people who are receiving it. Now, this is a really beautiful thought because it means that the body of Christ, which is the church, actually would bring the Spirit of Christ through its actions into the world. And let me just tell you, this is such a beautiful, incredible doctrine that the Holy Spirit could flow through wherever his members are placed to heal the spirits and to lift up the spirits of everyone who interacts with us. I mean, yet this is a really integral part of what it means to be a church and to be a member of the body of Christ. Meaning that the people that I'm interacting with, from my clients to my colleagues, to my employees, to my boss of all things, right? We can sometimes forget about the boss, and yet he's there too, or she's there too. Every person I interact with is looking for God on the inside. And that God could speak to their hearts through me is an extremely important thing for me to remember in my leadership. Because it means that through the influence that I bear as someone who's above them, or serving them as a leader, I'm able to enlighten, to awaken, to bring a spark out of the depths of that person that otherwise I couldn't happen. This is the advantage of Christian leadership. A Christian leader influences the world in 3 ways. The first of all is by a human being who's leading others upward by doing what's right and ethical. The second way, by producing good things and doing good services and blessing the world in that way and extending by fighting the good fight, not allowing impure things to be in your stores, making sure that the job you do is done honestly, making sure that your prices are correct and respectful, etc. And then in the third way, by directly bringing God's influence from your soul to their soul, by them interacting with someone who is leading them like Christ, leading them with holiness. Right? And this is a challenge for us because it's kind of easy to do the first 2. You can kind of stay apart from Christ and do the first 2, just be ethical, be good, talk about God, do the right thing. Yes, but the third one challenges us because there I need to plunge myself into Christ, be united with him, have his soul radiate through mine. And yet I'm going to tell you at the same time, when you start to look at your presence in this way and your job in this way, as if the reason why I was their boss was more than just getting the job done, but to be in their midst as a disciple of Christ, your religion will start to mean more to you. And your spirituality will take a whole new level of intensity. And this is the challenge why Christ made you a leader to begin with. If he gave you a business, it wasn't so that you could just make money thereby, although that's a fine thing. He gave you a business so that you could become a saint and that you would rely on him, lean in on him, right? And this is in order, why? So that everyone who's around you would be able to work in the presence of a saint. Right? Again, it's a big challenge, and yet this is why we're here, and this is what Christ is calling us to do.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So let's talk about what it means to be an instrument of Christ, an instrument of God, right? It's a term that we're used to using because it's familiar with us, right? To be God's tool, like St. Francis of Assisi says the prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, right? But it's actually hard for our minds to comprehend what this means. And this is why a lot of us struggle to put faith into our business and business into our faith, because we see the 2 realms as being very separate. Just as we see ourselves as being kind of separated also from God. What I mean by that is to say, look, a normal thing does something according to its own power that it has in it. If you have an axe, for example, the axe has a shape, and then the axe cuts wood by the shape. So no one says, well, that axe didn't cut the wood, God cut the wood. It's like, no, the axe cut the wood. That totally makes sense. It has a shape to cut wood. It was swung at the thing, so the axe split the wood. No piece. And then same thing, you have God. If he does something, there's no sense in saying someone else did it. Because if God does, creates the universe, he creates it. It's him who does it. It's almost like what we're used to doing is attributing the effect of something or someone to who they are. Okay, so there's a thing, what we are, and then there's the power that we do, and we unite the 2 together. But when you're using an instrument, you're using a thing not just according to its power, right, but also according to the power of the one who is deploying it. So if you take a scalpel, for example, of course a scalpel can cut, yes, but for a scalpel to cut in a very precise surgery, you want it to be in the hands of a very precise and skilled surgeon. So that then when the scalpel is wielded, it's wielded according to its power, yes, but to produce an effect, well, that's just really the effect of the surgeon who's using it. Or a violin. You could have many violins. It all depends on who plays them, right? And the sound of that violin will still belong to the violin, but there'll be something more added to it. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. And when it comes to doing God's work, God will use our voice, our words, our presence, our decisions as leaders to render his effect, which is something greater than we could ever do on our own. And this is the audacity, right, of a daring leader. This is what we call Christians daring leaders. Because when you're a Christian, you're daring to produce an effect beyond anything you could do just all by yourself. And what I find is just so many Christians do is they stay at that very first level of leadership. Remember what I said, there's 3 levels, right? The first level is I am a Christian and I'm just trying to do this for God, right? And then the second level is I am a Christian and what I do God's work, right? Through them. So not just doing my work for God, but I'm actually doing God's work, making my business into a place where we can bless the world through my business. And then the third level, though, is what I want you to dare for. And this third level is to say, I am a Christian and I let God use me to do his work. And this is a whole different level because there I need to be united to him like a violin in the hands of a great artist, letting him use, my skills, my decision, my drive, right? My intuition, my instinct, also my ability to detect what's going wrong in the world or where an opportunity might fail, or my empathy to build up the team, all the things that I do every single day when I go into the office, every single day when I build my team, every single day when I create a project and I'm collaborating with others. All those skill sets, planning it out, putting in a safety, realizing when you have to stop, looking at the thunder clouds to see if the rain is coming, making the decision about the weather, all these different things, balancing your budget. You do all those things, and yet you have the audacity to do them with Christ in your heart, with your mind turned to him. And so when you do those things, you allow him to do an effect that's even greater than you. And this, I mean, like you could go up and do a presentation and totally inspire somebody. And you didn't even try to inspire them, but they were inspired because you let Christ use you in that situation. And you, by keeping your patience and being virtuous and not using bad language, when you had a difficult conversation, you healed someone's broken heart. And you can say, well, that wasn't me doing that. And it wasn't you doing that. But it was Christ using you to do it. Instrumentally is the word, right? Like I am an instrument in the hands of Christ. And I love this, everyone, because it gives you a perspective on your workday that's audacious. And even if you're not at a business, if you're at home with your family, it's the same thing. To believe that my union with Christ will allow Christ to be united with the people around me. That is a lot of it. And a lot of times it's out of humility. We back down from that. We say, oh my gosh, Father, that's not me. I'm just a sinner, or I'm just somebody, and I'm like, well, if you're just a sinner, then it's time to become a saint. Right? I mean, you say, I'm just a nobody. Why do you say you're a nobody when God made you, right? Like who wants to spend 8 hours out of their day saying that they're a nobody? Nobody should want to be a nobody, right? Instead, we should spend our time during our day claiming who we are. You see, and there you see where a lot of us need to be healed. Because deep down inside, a lot of us are scared of the light that we will shine more than we are scared of our own darkness. It's not the darkness that frightens us, it's the light, right? And this is where I want to confront you because, hey, our world is waiting for people to shine the light of Christ on it. Why don't you become those people? And you can start to think to yourself all the reasons why, right? From my sins in my past to my personal shame, right? To my sense of being a failure. And I like to say all those areas are exactly where Christ is waiting to meet you. Because Christ wants you to meet him there, to lean in on him there, to find him in your weakness, to claim him there where you're broken so that he can get busy using you. Because meanwhile, a broken world out there thinks there's no hope. And you have all kinds of people who don't even know their right from their left or where to go. And God's put them in your office. He's put them in as your customers. He's put them as your suppliers.
A series of talks on Christian leadership to help you appreciate the Christian advantage. Find out more on Dare Great Things when you go to Podcast Central. Easy to do, EWTN.com/podcast, but always deepening our walk with God as we continue at our website anytime you need it. Stream it from anywhere. Also download the EWTN radio app so it makes it even easier. I'm Ace McKay. That's going to wrap things up for this week. Remember to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.